also from my hide, and this was an absolute surprise that they were sitting in the hide, and there were quite a few birds around, and then suddenly they all kind of, the sounds kind of stopped, and then they flew off. And I knew that something was happening. I was thinking maybe it's a mongoose or something like that. And then up came this rat snake that just came and looked, just leaned straight out over the water. I was like, magic, And then it turned a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. So making images of a rat snake in that sort of light. So it's not, when people say hides, immediately we think of birds, maybe mammals, but we never think of snakes. Snakes can come in there too. I've had a cobra at the hide as well. Design, for me, is an integral part to it, because if you have the best of setups, but if you are not in the best of conditions to make those images, somewhere you're going to miss that shot. Somewhere you're going to be, you're going to be moving your chair, doing something, making a sound. You want to be absolutely comfortable. So what height the counter set at? How wide is that going to be? So I have to also envision that maybe someone comes with one camera lens, someone's got a 2-camera lens set up. I need to have enough space for them to change gear, put something. I've got to create plug points because obviously batteries drain. So it's all of these kind of things that you've got to consider what the interior is going to look like, because it has to be dark, because you don't want the wildlife to see you through a window. So yeah, there's a lot of it that goes into it. And for me, I think it was an absolute synergy of two of my passions.
Hello and welcome to F Stopping by the Woods, a nature photography podcast. Most wildlife photography involves us traveling to and exploring a wildlife-rich area. Today's guest, Zhayynn James, works on the opposite. He builds photography hides where we wait for wildlife to show up. A landscape architect by profession and a nature photographer by passion, Zhayynn has two unique skills: the design understanding to build good sturdy photography hides and the functional requirements of a photographer who uses it. Apart from his own backyard in Chennai, Zhayynn has also designed and developed wildlife photography hides for leading resorts in India. While he is widely traveled, both in India and abroad, some of his favorite images are from his own backyard. Hello, Zhayynn. Good morning. Nice to have you here.
Good to see you after a long time, and good to be here.
Yes, indeed, it has been a really long time. Where all has wildlife travel been taking you? Where all have you traveled lately?
Well, it's only in the past few months that I've been kind of reconnecting with my wildlife photography. Post COVID, things slowed down in a big way, so it was just a few small trips. But last year was my first major trip, and that was in August, where I had done my first private guided tour. So I'd taken a couple of clients to Kenya. So it was a good way to sort of come back to wildlife photography. Prior to that, I had done Velavadar for the first time earlier in the year. So Velavadar, then Kenya. Earlier this year, it was Nanganatitu. Again, fancy place, really bang for your buck when it comes to wildlife photography and for birds, and I'm shooting against the light and stuff like that. I did Kaziranga just last month, or a month and a half ago.
So Kenya and Rangathitu were tours you guided, and
Yes.
Velavadar was something you went by yourself?
Yeah.
Good
And
stuff.
Kaziranga was a private guided tour as well.
Amazing. That's a good way to start off the year. So how was Velavadar? Never been there. On my list. What all did you see?
So that was the thing for me as well. I've never been. I've always heard about it and seen these images. So to see wolves for the first time, to see striped hyena for the first time, and of course, being Black Buck National Park, you see loads of black buck. But the landscape is very similar. I mean, you and I, we did Tal Chapar a few years ago. So in that sense, there's a lot of similarities to a Tal Chapar. So there was a sense of deja vu there. Yeah, just with striped hyenas and wolves, it was quite an amazing experience.
Yeah, I think I had a great time at the Tal Chapar tour, and that is my favorite habitat in India. So looking forward to go to Velavadar sometime. Can only imagine what it'll be to add like wolves and hyenas to that landscape, right? Really, really nice. So yeah, let's see how and when I can plan that. Outside of these 5-6 places that you mentioned, like Chapar, Velavadar, and Kaziranga and all that, what are some of your favorite destinations otherwise, like all over the world?
I start from India. I mean, I love Corbett. I love Little Round of Kutch. Amazing destinations, amazing places. I would love to do snow leopards, whether it's Himachal or Kashmir. I'm not sure which one would be the best, but it's definitely something that's been on my bucket list. I would love to do the Northeast as well. Um, Africa, I would love to do Namibia. I would. I mean, that landscape is, when I see images and videos, it's just amazing. Um, and polar bears for sure. Whether it's going to be Alaska or whether Canada or maybe Canada or Norway, I'm not sure. The Antarctic, I would love to do that. Patagonia, I would love to do that. I would also actually love to do Australia. While they don't have big mammals, and I think that's why people don't tend to think of Australia as a thing. It's just they've got amazing bird life. The landscapes are amazing. And yeah, I would love to do Australia. Sure.
I think the reptile life of Australia also something else. Like some of those lizards, some of those monster lizards are outstanding, right? Yeah. And Australia's on the other side of the wall is line, so to say. Everything that you see there is going to be unique. And I think even on macro, the spiders are like out of the world. So they're reptiles and lizards out of the world, snakes as well. So yeah, Australia's definitely on my list. As is Patagonia, right? Which is one of the most amazing landscapes I've seen. And it's got the mountain lions. So yes, let's see sometime soon. Amazing. So Zhayynn, one of the things I really, really like about your work is that while you're sort of really widely traveled and you've got some brilliant photos from across the globe, some of the photos that you have, which I really like, are from your own backyard, which you've shot using a photography hide. And you're one of the few people I know in India who specializes in building photography hides, hide photography, and some really stellar images from that, right? So how did this come about?
Right. So this is actually an interesting story because I'm good friends with Romulus Whitaker, and so we used to go and visit him once every few months, and he had this place. This is when he was still in the outskirts of Chennai in Chengalpet, and he said, "Look, I have this place," and he used to have this place called Karadi Malai Camp, and then they had to close that down. And he said, "Look, I want to do something where people can come, some sort of activities where we can make money to run this place." And I said, "Look, you've got amazing birds here. You've got amazing bird life. Why don't you do a hide?" He said, "Look, I don't know." I said, "Seriously, photographers would pay good money because the kind of species that you have in the, he had a lot of bird life that I used to see in and around his property." And I said, "If you can do a nice reflection pool or something like that, definitely people would spend money to come." And he was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll think about it." And then I started thinking, look, I'm telling him he should do this, but how do I know it's going to work? And then I decided I should do it for myself at my own farm. And I started out with a really small little thing in mind. And then I thought, I have the space to do this. Why am I doing this small? It's such a tiny scale. Then I decided I'm going to design a proper hide, design a reflection pool. And so that actually became like my laboratory, evolving over the years. The structure itself didn't evolve, but everything else around it is how I designed the reflection pool, the perches, the backgrounds, what worked photographically, what did, So that was how it started, and that was the source of my experiments. And then I put up a video about it on YouTube, and someone connected with me and said, "I saw your video, and I'd like you to do one for me in Coimbatore." And so I was doing that. That was my first commission to design a hide for someone. And it just kind of picked up from there. My next client was someone who I'd known for a long time, but we had not really been in touch, and that was Anil Kumble, the cricketer. We'd met in the past or something, and he had my number. And we'd not really been in touch. Till I landed from Coimbatore, after visiting that client's side, I land in Chennai, and I have a WhatsApp message from Anil Kumble saying, "Hey, I saw your video about the hide. I'd like to talk because I want to hide." I was like, this is not happening. So ended up designing a hide for Anil in his farmhouse outside outside Bangalore. And that was really a wonderful work in progress because he is as passionate a wildlife photographer as he is a cricketer. And so there was a lot of, how does this work? What do we do? Why are we doing this and not that? Um, when I posted that to Instagram, then I had Pug Dundee Resorts get in touch and say, hey, we saw the hide that you did for Anil Kumble. We'd like to talk to you about doing hides. And so it just one led to the other, and then started designing commercial hides as well.
That's quite amazing. And also, what a cool way to just drop big names. Ram Whitaker on one end, Anil Kumble on the other, both of whom I'd like fall at their feet at if I saw them in real life. But that's really good to know. And yes, I think Anil Kumble is also a proper wildlife photographer, right? So good to know that your first hide was in sort of your backyard, so to say, right? And for those of us who are not really fully aware of the concept of hides, just take us through what a photography hide is. What should it have? What shouldn't it have? What are some of the necessary things that makes a hide a good photography hide for wildlife?
Right. That's a great question, because usually when we think of wildlife, we end up going into the wild and then we move from place to place and finding different species. But with the hide, it's the opposite. You create the environment, or you find the right environment that is conducive to different species coming in. And then there are two parts to a hide. One is where you as a photographer or photographers are sitting or standing or whatever it is. And that's a screened off environment. And the other is the actual environment where the animals or the birds come in. And with a hide, at its most basic, it should be that the animals don't know that you're there. So there are some, very basic hides where people use thatch and nursery nets and stuff like that. Pop-up hides that people use, I think, for ODKF and things like that in Western Ghats, because they're seasonal, But that's essentially what it is. You're standing, you've got a screen environment in between you, and you're shooting through a window, and the birds come in. Either the birds come in because there's feed or there's water or a combination of both, or, naturally occurring, or maybe people put out bowls of water and things like that. Or you create larger reflection ponds. Birds, especially in summer, come to bathe, to drink, and also mammals. Reptiles as well. So that is at its most basic. That's what a hide is. And at no given point should the wildlife know that you're there. So that's a big plus for mirrorless cameras, obviously, because there's no sound. With a DSLR camera, obviously there's a bit of noise. Unless the birds get used to it, then they're okay with it. But ideally, they shouldn't know that you're there. And it's both for their safety and also for yours, if in case there are other sort of large animals that are present. You want to be safe. You want to also shield yourself from the elements, either the sun or the rain, stuff like that. But for me, a hide is not just a screen between you and the wildlife. It's also the fact that you have to spend hours as a wildlife photographer. It has to be ergonomic. You could be 5'2", you could be 6'3", but the ergonomics have to work for both equally.
Yeah.
And that's where the design element comes in, because you're spending hours sitting like that. And what kind of gear are you using? Someone could be an enthusiast with a 100, 400 mm lens. Someone could be a professional with a 600 mm lens. So how do you create that setup where it's optimal for both users? So both ends of the spectrum, you can get good images. So these are the sort of things that go into designing a good hide. Where's the light coming from? Are you doing front lit, back lit, slit? A lot of these sort of things go into it.
Yeah. I think a lot of things that I want to sort of move into separate directions from them. The first one for me really is the point you made about not letting the animals know that there is some sort of human intervention. And I think it was Steve Winter who made this point in one of the NIF talks, where he spoke of eye contact in photography not necessarily being a good thing, because when some animal is looking right into the camera, you're letting yourself be a part of that frame because that's what the animal is looking at. So, he said that the best photos are the ones where the animal is looking elsewhere, because that is really, really candid. It's almost like a zero interference kind of photo. And in a way, a hide photography setup is a zero interference setup, right? When we're either walking or when we're in the Jeep in the jungle, we are interfering. And even though animals might be bold, might not be bothered by it, they are very aware of your presence. And to some extent, maybe that has an impact on the way they behave. So in a sense, a height photography or a height photo is something which sort of, shows behavior which is very, very natural, very unique. So that's definitely one part which I take away. And the second thing you mentioned is about design. And I think in design, there are two aspects of design. One is from the photography perspective of design, which is in terms of where does the light come from? Is it going to be side lit? Is it going to be backlit? If it's good light throughout the day, you're not going to have reflection, like in the case of the reflection point that you spoke of. What does it look like in the evening? So that's one part of it, right? And the second part of it is, what is the inside of a hide like? Is it comfortable? Is it okay for somebody like me who's a hefty guy to use? Is it okay for somebody else who's a much smaller person? Do they both get like eye level photos? Can they sit at comfortable levels? Because the couple of times I've tried photographing from heights, they've been extremely uncomfortable in the sense that you're sitting in a really small cramped area and you have a very, very tricky angle out of which you're shooting. And the angle is best set so that you get the best photos, right? Not necessarily for your physical comfort. And if you're spending 4 or 5 hours doing that, you're maybe sort of, cranking your neck and all of that. So in LRK, even though during one trip, we had the option of, in Run of Kutch, that is, where we had the option of setting up a small height to photograph foxes. We decided to do away with it. And we just sort of laid flat on the ground for 4 or 5 hours till we got fox pop shots. And that's also not the most comfortable thing. I mean, once you lay flat on the ground in your stomach for 4 or 5 hours, you know how much your back and neck starts hurting when you're photographing. But yeah, I think the beauty of height photography is that you're actually going to be comfortable for most of the day. And when the animal comes about, you're able to take these photos. So talk me a little bit about the earlier part of designing for light. Is it possible to have a hide which gives you like great photos throughout the day? Or you're saying that, hey, this is an evening hide for me. Only in the evening am I going to get the best light, and the rest of the time it's going to be suboptimal, and that's okay? Or is it possible to have something that works through the day? How does that work?
With the light, that's the absolute most critical thing, right? Because you can have a fantastic location, but if you don't have the light, how are you going to make those images? Those images are never going to come through, right? Especially considering the fact that birds and other animals, they tend to be crepuscular, and you're not going to get that activity happening. So with the light, usually the most straightforward is you choose, for example, the hike that I did at my place, because it was almost 2 hours outside of Chennai. I knew I'm only going to get there in the afternoon, which means I'll use it only in the evening. So I designed it for evening light, right? So that was my choice. So when we did Anil's place, for example, we wanted to optimize it because that's the place he goes on weekends. So he could get up early in the morning and go to the hide or use it in the evening. So I designed it for both morning light and evening light. So positioning it according to that sort of aspect. The same thing for the hide at Pench Lodge for Pagdandi. I said, you're going to spend this money for a hide. Don't make it only one. Let's hedge our bets and let's make it great for morning light and evening light. So again, what I have to do is then study the solar path through the year and see, because obviously the sun moves. So your summer sun is completely different from your winter sun, where the sunlight is falling. So I've got to optimize that, then choose the location. But it's absolutely fine to also have just one and say, look, I'm going to shoot only in the morning, I'm going to shoot only in the evening. And that's absolutely fine. But light is everything.
100%. And you also, I'm thinking, might have to optimize for subjects, right? If you were to optimize for owls, you're also looking at maybe some artificial light. If you're looking at nocturnal subjects, you're looking at some kind of artificial light. I think some photography hides abroad do that. Have you also worked with artificial lights at hides?
Yeah. So at my hide, I had lights at Anand's place also. But the only thing is he's almost never there in the evenings. Yeah. But one of the good things that he did was that we discussed this and he put up a little CCTV camera. So whenever there's activity, the lights come on and then he's able to know what's come to the hide. But at Pench Lodge, again, we use lights specifically for this reason, because you'll have jackals coming by in the night. We've had civet cats coming in the night or owls coming. And so you need the artificial light that doesn't scare them away, but it's the right lux levels for them to feel comfortable and for you to make images as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And you spoke about your hide being near Chennai. And every time I speak to anyone about wildlife within the city, the answer always surprises me, even though I've heard so much about in Chennai, we find all these species of wildlife. So what all did you actually see at your hide near Chennai? What are some of the things that surprised you?
So the land that we have, because basically I'm a landscape architect, so we have a nursery land, and so that was surrounded completely by agricultural land. So initially, I didn't have high hopes in terms of species. Just as a wildlife photographer, I wanted to make good images. But over the course of 3 years or 4 years that we had done that, we recorded 47 species of birds and about 11 species of mammals and reptiles. That's including cobras and rat snakes, so mongoose, field rats, field mice, and just Asian paradise flycatcher, the male with the white moth with a long tail. Birds that people don't typically associate with Chennai, the red-whiskered bulbul. So when I first posted, people are like, Chennai? No way. How is that possible? It's not actually Chennai. So it's just an hour and a half, 2 hours outside. It was proof that given the right environment and you wait long enough, you never know what's going to turn up. I was pretty sure I was going to see spotted owlets, but my surprise was when I had a Scops owl visit.
Wow.
That was, my wife and I were sitting there, and we were just reading, and then she came, we both just froze. It was just an amazing experience.
I would not have guessed was this the Oriental Scops? Would not have guessed it at all.
Oriental Scops.
Amazing. I'm guessing you got barn owls as well?
No, that's the one thing that I had seen in and around, but I had never been at the hide when a barn owl had come.
Okay. Yeah, when you said farmland and, I thought my first guess would have been even before the spotted owl, the barn owl maybe. But yeah, see, that's what I meant. You would not expect that there is so much wildlife, right? And that sort of is the reason why everyone should sort of explore their backyards a bit more, because you are going to be surprised by what you see there. I was in Chennai with a friend, and we had just done a workshop, and the next day we were in a park, and we both heard and later on saw the Indian pitta. Like, I did not expect the middle of Chennai in a small park to have like a pitta during winter. So yeah. One interesting point you mentioned is that you're a landscape architect by profession. Yes, I do know that. But could you tell us all how much of that has gone into the passion behind photography hides, and how much of that functional skill is important to be able to make a good hide?
For me, it was an absolute synergy of two passions. One, me being a designer, two, being a photographer. And I think that's probably where the whole hide thing came in. I was like, to do a hide right, to get it absolutely right. Like you said, you spend hours in there. You need to know your design ergonomics. What height? What's the right height? What's the right depth at something? And like I said, people shoot with different focal lengths. You're going to get different species. Design, for me, is an integral part to it, because if you have the best of setups, but if you are not in the best of conditions to make those images, somewhere you're going to miss that shot. Somewhere you're going to be, you're going to be moving your chair, doing something, making a sound. You want to be absolutely comfortable. So what height the counter set at, how wide is that going to be? So I have to also envision that maybe someone comes with one camera lens, someone's got a 2-camera lens set up. I need to have enough space for them to change gear, put something. I've got to create plug points because obviously batteries drain. So it's all of these kind of things that you've got to consider what the interior is going to look like, because it has to be dark, because you don't want the wildlife to see you through a window. So yeah, there's a lot of it that goes into it. And for me, I think it was an absolute synergy of two of my passions. Yeah.
So talk me a little bit through the interior of the hide, right? Let's go about that. And this is more the synergy part of it. I'm guessing as the architect part of it, you've taken care of the structural design, the aesthetics. But some absolute delight for me when I saw the interiors of the hides were like, I think your hide in Chennai had a place for a gimbal where somebody could sort of fix the camera. And I think it also had the ability to slide it along the window, and you do it without making too much noise if you had to change your angle and so on and so forth. So if I'm a photographer coming there, what are some of these 3 or 4 features that might be absolute delights for me, which I'm going to discover when I come there?
Yeah, so when I started, first it was just a beanbag. But then the beanbag being heavy, and because you're not lifting, so you got to drag. Then I thought, no, I've got to get a slider. And at that time, I didn't know about markets for the slider. So I actually designed my own. I had a fabricator make one. It was fairly simple, but it worked beautifully. And it was noiseless until I found a proper slider online. And then it was like, I try a fluid head on one. And I'm like, I'm going to try a gimbal head on the other, see which one works better for different things. So usually when I'm at my height, I would set up my 500 mm on the gimbal, and I would put my 7200 on the fluid head, so I can shoot video and I can shoot images as well. So that's one side of it, right? So you can design it for the gimbal. So I've got to see what height that's going to be at, because once you design the window, you obviously will want your lens just above there. But then, if the moment you put the gimbal, if it's going to be up here, so you've lost that whole eye level thing. So right from the get-go, I've got to design keeping that in mind. Like I said, the interiors, ideally, now this would depend upon someone's budget. You want to soundproof it so that, you drop stuff, you're moving stuff, you have, like in cinemas, you have sound absorptive mediums, or in conference rooms, you have, carpeting and stuff like that just absorbs a little bit of sound. So you can do stuff like that. Dark paint on the inside because you don't want any reflections. And the mechanism by which you're opening, whether it's a window, whether you've got a glass window that opens out, or you've got a screen, because you've got to be discreet. You can have the most amazing setting right there, and the moment you go, and it's gone. Yeah, so that's all kind of part of the design, and
Amazing. So when I have all the time and all the money in the world, I'm going to sort of design a photography hide somewhere where I can spend all my day maybe sipping coffee, and birds are going to come and photograph them. But for the time being, I have a really small balcony in Bombay with some sort of potted plants. And in Bangalore, where my parents stay, we have a smallish garden with like coconut tree and a couple of other trees. For those of us who live in these sort of really small setups, is there a way in which we can convert some part of this to a place where we can just sit and take photos and make a hide of this? Are there ways in which, I hear sunbirds every day in Bombay. I know that they sort of keep coming there. I hear prinias in Bangalore as well. So is there a way in which I can, without necessarily walking out with my camera, make some of these into smaller workable photography hides?
So we'll start with the fact that you said balconies. Now, these days, most people live in apartments. So the balcony is kind of the nom du jour for everyone. Yeah, you could. If you have at one end of the balcony, imagine if you put up like a little camo screen, something where you can come discreetly sit at the back. You've got a little hole, you put your tripod and your camera, and you're aiming at this end. And now maybe you've got a nice branch. You might have clipped it from a garden, from a park, or it could be even just a dry branch that you've clipped and kept. And then you've got, say, maybe a little bit of water right there where a bird is going to come and sit on the branch first, and then come down to the water, especially in summer. And then you could, either you've got the background of the city, or maybe you've got a nice diffused background that you put on the other side of the wall. This is what they do in Costa Rica, where people shoot
Correct.
Your hummingbirds. That's invariably a setup where they've got an autofocus kind of a background, but it's right there behind the bird. So you can do the same. And the fact is, at the end of the day, you want a nice, beautiful image of a sunbird or something coming and sitting there. You've picked a few fresh flowers from the garden, kept it there. It might come and, try to get the nectar. Or even if it's bird food, say like parakeets. Parakeets can pretty easily get acclimatized to residences if you put rice and a few things like that. Just as long as you keep the pigeons away, unless you want to get the pigeons in, because they obviously tend to shoo off the other birds. But this is easy to do.
Yeah, I think very few people, by looking at some of those hummingbird photos from Costa Rica, realize that most of them are shot indoors against a green wall or a green screen, and not really in the forest. But I'm not as fussed about quote unquote natural habitats, because if parakeets are living in Bombay, that is their natural habitat, right? Like a good example for me always has been the black-shouldered kite. More often than not, I see it sitting on an electrical wire. And for me, that is the most natural habitat for it, or so it has become. So I'm really not fussed about whether I get a green natural habitat as long as I get good behavior. But a really important sort of point that you made was about having good perches that they can sit on, because it serves two things. A, you want the bird to perch somewhere, right? And you want that to be there comfortable for the bird as well, so that it spends time. And B, you've also got the perch in a good place for you, so that your backgrounds are sorted, your focal lengths are sorted according to that. So yeah, that's something I'll take away. And I've noticed that in some of your photos as well, you've really thought through about what kind of perches you have in your Chennai hide, which sort of really adds so much more to the image, especially some of these perches which get such beautiful backlit, backlit golden light at in the evening. And we'll go through some of those photos. So that's really good. So yeah, essentially have good perches, put a green screen at one end behind which you're there, ensure that you've got flowering plants for like your sunbirds and so on and so forth, or you've got water for birds in summer and they're going to come. So that's a good way of going about a hide. Good to know that I could put something up in Bombay, have the time. Let me see how I go about that. With that at one end, let's go to the complete other end. What are some of your favorite overall wildlife photography hides? Like I was looking up one in Botswana where lions and leopards and hyenas come to drink water in the morning as well. Could not afford it, so I did not go there. But I'm sure you have a few of some of these really good wildlife photography hides, both India as well as abroad. Which are some of these for you, and which ones are you looking forward to? What does your, so to say, bucket list of hides contain?
So some of the best hides that I've seen in Botswana, I think there's Mashatu. I think that might be the one that we're looking at. And now it's in Botswana, in South Africa, in so many ways. These guys have looked at different ways to create. Even in Kenya now, there's the Lentor hide, there's Shompole hide. So I'm doing a private guided tour with a client in September, and we're doing Shompole hide. So I'm really looking forward to that. Amazing. Because it's one thing to have these ideas and do it on my own, but I would also love to see how that is in that setting, So the Shompole hide, the Lentor hide, the lighting that they've done, the way they've set things up, Shompole as well, Mashatu. Mashatu not so much with the lighting, but just the setting, the way they've done it. There are so many hides in South Africa, and there's this guy whose work I really admire, who's this Hungarian wildlife photographer, award-winning wildlife photographer, and a hide designer called Pench. And he's, as far as I know, at least one of the pioneers in the field in a really big way. So he would do stuff in his own backyard. So I kind of resonated with that, because he would do stuff in his own backyard, and then he took the idea further and further. And then whether it's wetland bird hides, whether it's treetop hides, and then mammal hides. So a lot of the hides in Africa he's done as well. And his work is just fantastic. Just to see the kind of portfolio of work that he's done. So it's very inspiring. Yeah. And so there's a whole world of hides that I would like to get out there and see. And
For sure. So that's a lot of good sort of insights on hides and everything else. Anything else on hides that maybe we haven't spoken about that you'd like to share?
Like I said, I've done a few hides. My favorite hide that I've done is the Kipling Hide at Pench Lodge for Pug Dundee. And initially, when we got in touch, they were looking at just a hide was, you might photograph some birds. So we walked the whole property, and I was like, no. There is so much more we can do than just that. And the great thing, and this is so important for me, is to have a client who's willing to trust you and say, okay, I'm willing to spend, let's do that. And so we ended up doing this hide that's at the edge of a grassland, and that drops off into a little riverine forest. So it's a rewilded forest. So you've got a seasonal stream that runs at the back. So I wanted it positioned in that place so you get both grassland birds and animals, as well as the forest birds and animals that come through. And it's been so successful. We get jackals and owls, about 50, 60 species of birds till now. And we've even got big cats, leopards and tigers. So for me, that's just like the biggest win, to have that idea come through from fruition to fruition, and having a client that, who trusts that vision and says, okay, let's do it. And then it all sort of comes to life. I've had people.
Sorry. So where is the Kipling Hide in Pug Dundee? Which part of India is it in? I know it's in southern India, but is it Hana?
No, this is Pench Lodge at Pench. So on the Madhya Pradesh side, not on the Maharashtra side.
I've been to that. So big cat, like, do they? Have you seen them, or is it just camera trap images from the hide, or do their clients get to see them regularly?
So right as of now, it's only camera trap images because it's a bit iffy, and generally people who come to a high-end lodge, they go for the safaris. They may do a morning session or may do an evening session. People don't generally spend through the night. So that is actually how I designed the hide. I designed the hide for four guests to be seated and a lounge area for someone to sleep if they want. So if you've got more than one photographer, so one can have a nap, one is awake. We've got coffee stations, fridge, biscuits, the whole work. So you're comfortably set in there. And so that's when, obviously, especially in summer. And so I'm going with the client now in May. So we're hoping to spend at least one night all the way through. So let's see what happens.
So that sounds like my dream setup for a wildlife photography holiday, right? You get up in the morning, you go on a game drive, and you come back, and hopefully you have some breakfast or whatever, and hopefully you've got like a memory card full of tiger images. And you come back here and you sit in the hide and you get all kinds of birds coming to the hide. And come 3 p.m., you probably had lunch or whatever, and then you go on your next game drive, and then you come back and you get something in the evening and something into the night. Yeah, so that is my dream of how I'd like to spend like a tiger safari vacation. Because one thing I dislike about these wildlife outings for the tiger safari are your downtime between the safaris is a bit much, and sometimes it's so hot that you're like not doing anything, right? And it's too hot to sort of walk around and do birds or whatever. But if I'm in a hide and all my downtime spent at a hide where birds just show up, that's ideal. So yes, good stuff. Could we talk about maybe 4 or 5 of your favorite images that you've got from hides? It could be at your own hide. It could be at some of the hides that you've designed. So could we talk about some of them?
Sure. For me, one of my favorite images, and this was from my hide, is and this was taken in the summer a few years ago, where we had these white-rumped munias that would come and sit in the little perches. And then suddenly they all came down from the perch, flew down to the edge of the reflection pool. And then I had 5 of them in a line, perfectly still water, and all of them lined up. And for me, that was a wow moment because it's such a simple, common bird, but the opportunity to make an image like that was something that I really enjoyed. And because it's so fleeting, those birds don't sit around for a long time. You see what munias are like, they're fast, flitty little birds, and then there's just a few seconds. Another was also at my hide, and this was
at this particular image, right? I mean, I love that image too. It is probably one of my favorite images from your hide set. What I love about it is how still the reflection is. Like you turn the image upside down, and I'd not be able to tell that which is reflection, which is the actual bird. So how does one design a hide with such a perfect reflection? How does one go about that?
So this is kind of part of the tradecraft in designing and engineering, to know like how you want to get the stillness of the water. What do you have to do for the treatment of the edges? So it's a bit of tradecraft in there in an engineering sense as to how you want to get it. But at the same time, you also want it to look absolutely natural.
Yeah.
So there are these hides that I've seen in Europe, and they are amazing, but they've got these razor sharp edges, and then you've got a squirrel on the edge, and it looks fantastic. But at the same time, you also know that it's not natural because you don't see that edge. So I wanted to kind of walk that very fine line between having these beautiful reflections. At the same time, the edge has to look a little natural. And yeah, so that's the thing to it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that photo. So yeah. Which are some of your other favorite photos?
Also from my hide, and this was an absolute surprise that they're sitting in the hide, and there were quite a few birds around, and then suddenly they all kind of, the sounds kind of stopped, and then they flew off. And I knew that something was happening. I was thinking maybe it's a mongoose or something like that. And then up came this rat snake that just came and looks, just leaned straight out over the water. And I was like, oh, magic, And then it turned a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. And so making images of a rat snake in that sort of light. So it's not, when people say hides, immediately we think of birds, maybe mammals, but we never think of snakes. Snakes can come in there too. I've had a cobra at the hide as well. But these two at my hide. Third image, and this guy became a resident. It was this white-breasted water hen that would come every evening. Would come, you'd hear it from half a kilometer away, making all this noise. Would come and then very skittish. Come, and drink a little bit. Would start to bathe, suddenly freak out, run off, and come back. And it got so acclimatized to the place that obviously it was building a nest somewhere. It would bring nesting material. So this image that I shared, it was bringing a grass stalk, and then it walked up with the grass stalk, and then it dipped it, and then cleaned the grass stalk off, and then walked back. And I love that opportunity to make that image with the reflection with the grass stalk.
Yeah, love that. Love that image too. What about some of the other hides? If not your images, maybe somebody else has taken, or maybe you yourself have taken it in the Kipling Hide or elsewhere. Any interesting subjects and photos from that one?
So at the Kipling Hide, again, quite a few of the bird images. One I really loved, and this was a surprise. Though it was not a reflection image, I created at the Kipling Hide these different sort of perches. Because I know some birds and some animals will want to come at ground level. Some of the perches have to be light and delicate for some of the smaller birds to sit on. And I wanted something a bit more robust for what if there are larger birds of prey or civets that might come. And right enough, I'd almost done that morning. And it was about to wind up when I looked, and I just had to peep a little bit. And there was this oriental honey buzzard sitting right there on top of this trunk that was overlooking the thing. And that was one of my favorite images because I've never seen one up so close. And was completely oblivious to the fact that I was sitting, 20 feet from it. There was that, and there's also a jungle cat at the Kipling Hide. I really love that because they're so skittish, so shy, and they just became acclimatized to come down to drink water. And I've heard they've had kittens there now. So I'm expecting that really maybe in May we'll have some kitten activity, hopefully. Then the reflection of the jungle cat in the water again at the Kipling Hide, one of my favorite images.
If they have kittens there, I'm just happy to go to that property and not do tiger safaris and just park myself at the hide for jungle cat and kittens, because I have never photographed wild cat kittens as much as I've really, really planned around them, right? Every now and then we hear about desert cat kittens in Chapel, but the den is so far away, you barely get to see them. So, and that's the point about hides, right? The animals are very, very oblivious to your presence, and you get to see some really, really intimate behavior, and you're behind sort of a screen. They don't know you're there. So for sure, because jungle cats are quite hard to see otherwise. I've seen them in Bikaner. I've seen them once or twice in Chapel. But you get to see them, but you get to see them from a distance. You don't get to spend time with them. You don't get to sort of photograph them, film them, etc. But I'm guessing at a hide, you have the luxury of being able to spend time, because I'm assuming they'll spend time at the water. If they have kittens around, hopefully the kittens come to water, and, kittens are going to be like really cute. So looking forward to that. So do keep me posted on any news you hear about the kittens. I will definitely pack my bags and go there and photograph things from there. So yes, that's amazing. And the jungle cat image is one of my favorite images of yours as well from a hide. So yeah, thanks for sharing info about that.
And then there are a few images that I shared with you that Anil Kumble had taken at his hide. One was this mongoose, and I just love the moment that he's shot it. He shot this vertically, and it was like this really dramatic moment of it tossing its head back. There was that. There's a grey hornbill image portrait that he shot at the hide. And I was talking to him, or rather communicating with him just last week. He said his curator, or this guy who looks after the place, said, there's a new word. I don't know what it is. There's something different. And then he was luckily at the hide that evening. And then an Indian pitta walked up. And he got the shot of an Indian, but I'm like, I cannot be happier that, he was there on that day and it showed up.
I mean, if it's okay, I'll share the image of the mongoose that you shared with me, which Anil Kumble has taken. Please. I think that's such a fabulous image. That could be on the cover photo of any magazine, right? It's such a stellar image, and absolute kudos to him on the way he's been able to frame it and capture that absolute moment. And again, the reflection works beautifully, goes to show that this is a kind of an image that you might not get if you weren't in the hide, because how difficult is it to sort of get an eye-level photo of a mongoose, sort of that behavior. Yeah, absolutely fabulous images, and kudos to you for that perfect design there. But is there anything that you'd like to share with any photographer who's listening to this? Could be about heights, could be otherwise, or any of the things that you'd want them to keep in mind or take away from this discussion overall?
First thing is obviously with a height, people sometimes wrongly get the impression that heights are guaranteed sightings. They're not. It's still wildlife. You control your side of the environment. You don't control, what happens on the outside. The thing with doing a safari in a park is you wait for 5 minutes, you don't see anything, you can choose to move on or choose to stay.
Yeah.
Here, you have to stay. And you have to stay put because you can't keep opening the doors, opening the hatch, walking around. You just have to stay put. So your patience is dialed up to 10 here. You absolutely have to wait. Other thing is just etiquette. It's just be quiet. Don't play, music. Don't play. Don't be on the phone. Even if you're talking to someone, even if you don't see anything there, because animals' hearing is pretty sharp. So how we behave is so important because that's the big difference in a safari because animals are used to the vehicles, used to the jeeps. That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be quiet, even in the park, but at least they're used to it there. Here, they're not. So every little sound is going to make a difference. But yeah, I would say if you've not tried to hide, whether it's my hide or anyone's hide, by all means, try that experience and see what it's like. Because in one sense, you're completely surrendering control. That you are not saying, I want to go left, I want to go right, I want to do this. What you see is what you get. And you have to completely immerse yourself in that moment of when that bird comes and sits and perches or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think wildlife photography in general, you're at the mercy of what wildlife decides to do at that moment. But I think even more so in height photography, you're absolutely at their mercy in terms of, whether they choose to show up that day, not show up that day. So yeah, absolutely makes sense. Thank you so much. I will share your website contact details in the video description. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they should be able to do that. Thank you for your time. I absolutely love this discussion. And maybe another time we can discuss about wildlife photography in detail on images from Tanzania or your images from Kaziranga and any other places. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for having me on your show. And I loved the conversations we had prior to this and obviously this conversation. And I just, more than anything, I just hope that this sparks interest in people. What they do with that interest going forward is different, but interest in the wild, interest in wildlife, interest in our environment, I think is always a good.
100%. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bud. Take care.